if you've been following Havana syndrome, maybe you have no idea what Havana syndrome is. There's this sketchy possible disease going around in Cuba, and it was affecting a lot of government officials. There were people reporting brain injuries and headaches and just weird things going on in their body. And there are a lot of possible explanations thrown around about where the Havana syndrome could come from. Is it from, secret agents in Cuba blasting microwaves at U.S. diplomats? Are they being poisoned? What is going on? Why are people having these weird symptoms? And so I did some looking into it. I came across an article that is called Pentagon Issues Stark Warning About Havana Syndrome as Mystery Attacks. And this is from Independent. So you can search this article on Independent if you would like. But I pulled out an excerpt. And this is what the Independent said on Havana Syndrome. They say, quote, "The Pentagon has warned national security officials to immediately evacuate their immediate surroundings if they detect a sudden onset of pressure, sound, or heat in the head. The warning comes amid continuing fallout from the Havana Syndrome, which has seen more than 100 diplomatic U.S. staff struck down with a mysterious illness. Both domestic and overseas staff have been told to be on alert for the symptoms, the cause of which remains unexplained. We need to believe our personnel who are coming forward," a senior administration official told McClatchy, D.C. "People are facing real symptoms. We are very conscious that people are experiencing something very real, and it is having a negative effect on their health. And we're seeing better health outcomes the sooner we can respond to that," the official said. Havana Syndrome victims tore into Secretary of State over mystery illness, report says. It was first detected in Cuba. It is an unexplained medical phenomenon which causes sudden and troubling sensory events that are often followed by symptoms such as headaches, pain, nausea, and disequilibrium. More than a dozen U.S. personnel have been left with permanent brain injuries, Jesus Christ, and other chronic illnesses, with illnesses reported in Vietnam, Austria, China, and Washington, D.C. A declassified U.S. State Department report obtained by BuzzFeed found the most likely cause of the illness was crickets. We'll come back to that. It ruled out radio or microwave weapons as being responsible for buzzing sounds, one of the symptoms of the syndrome, and said that the quote-unquote most likely source of the sounds was the Indies short-tailed cricket. So, there's this disease, this possible syndrome going around that has affected over 100 U.S. diplomats. And people are complaining about headaches, people having permanent brain injuries and chronic illnesses. And so if I heard 3 people reporting about this, say there were 3 U.S. diplomats and they went to Cuba, they were in Havana, they all separately reported that they were having some sort of brain injury, some sort of brain dysfunction, some sort of symptoms, that there was a common through line through what all 3 of the people reported, kind of like COVID. If 3 people report COVID-like symptoms, you can say, we're going to draw a distinction that this is COVID. You'll probably test positive for COVID. And so if there were 3 U.S. diplomats that went to Cuba and came back with symptoms that all kind of had a similar through line, and officials don't have a name for it, scientists don't have a name for it, they call this Havana Syndrome, I would say, okay, maybe it's a coincidence. Yes, 3 U.S. diplomats coming down with, headaches and even brain injuries. That would be a big coincidence, but also maybe 3 separate incidents occurred, or maybe they had bad food or something. I don't know. Some sort of parasite that inflicted all 3 of them. It's not a huge percentage possibility, but sure, it could have happened. That separately they all came down with the same thing that was of this nature that Havana Syndrome sounds like, and it would be believable basically. That sorry, it would point to a coincidence if it was only three people, because you could see if something happens to three people, that's not so many people where you think, okay, something's going on here. But if it's happening to 100 people who are all falling into the same job category, which is U.S. diplomatic officials, and they're all reporting symptoms that are on a spectrum of more or less uh, the same thing, which is some sort of headache, pain, nausea, feeling of like losing your balance, disequilibrium. If you have 100 separate people reporting similar symptoms that are in the same job. So it's not only 100 people in Cuba are reporting these symptoms, it's 100 US diplomats. It's not even 100 diplomats, it's 100 US diplomats. What are my thoughts on this? It's that if I'm doing a hard take on Havana syndrome, which I want to do, I think there's definitely something going on. I think there's definitely some outside thing, whether it's somebody or something, some force. There's some external force, and it doesn't necessarily have to be someone that's trying to cause harm. It could be something's going on in Cuba where people are being incidentally exposed. Maybe they're all staying in the same hotel. They could be staying in similar places, going to similar meetings. I imagine the diplomats kind of stay within a similar routine, location-wise. Maybe there's something going on where it's not a pernicious act being carried out by Cuba or a pernicious act being carried out by someone, but it's just like an incidental exposure. And we don't have a cause for it yet. There's no clear cause, but there's clearly some sort of exposure going on where 100 people who are all in similar places are getting the same shit happening to them. And it's not just, something like the common cold, like, oh, I had some sniffles or I had some soreness in my throat. It's fucking brain injuries and pain and nausea. And it, typically, that points to something that is being inflicted in some manner. It's when 100 people who, in that large quantity, there's something going on. And when I hear this stuff, maybe a year ago, if I heard this, I would think, there's no chance that something evil is going on or some country or some forces purposely poisoning U.S. diplomats, and more or less 100. If I heard that a year ago, I would think, it's probably some incidental exposure. Maybe there's like some radioactive site, or maybe there's a parasite going around. Maybe it's something like COVID, but a localized strain. I don't know. But I wouldn't think it was someone perpetrating this act. I would think it was just an incidental thing where diplomats happened to be going to the same hotels, same conferences, same places, and they all came down with this shit. But now, having looked into MK Ultra, which is a CIA operation where the CIA carried out LSD experiments on on citizens that volunteered, and also many people who did not volunteer, like prisoners and prostitutes and mental patients. People were dosed without their knowledge with LSD and just done. It was done for the sake of science to see what happens, and it was an entire shit show. And I actually just had Stephen Kinzer on the Auxoro podcast to talk about in depth what the fuck happened with Operation MK Ultra. We talked about Sidney Gottlieb, the guy who masterminded MK Ultra and designed the experiments and all the different things that happened to people. And if I had heard this Havana syndrome situation before learning about MK Ultra, before doing research for the Sidney Gottlieb before doing research for the Stephen Kinzer interview, where I spoke about Stephen Gottlieb at length, I would say, no harm, no foul. It's probably just some accidental exposure to these diplomats. But, the United States CIA, the United States Secret Service agencies have a history of not giving a fuck about people and human life and being willing to experiment just for the possibility of something like mind control that has never been proven, nor do we have any evidence that you can actually control people's minds. But the CIA did this for decades. So to me, it's not, it sounds like I'm wearing a tinfoil hat. Maybe I am. But why wouldn't another country look to do that to us? Maybe someone else, whether, it doesn't necessarily have to be Cubans, but it could be some sort of state or some sort of agency from another country that is purposely poisoning or exposing United States diplomats to something that would be tame compared to MK Ultra. MK Ultra people were just getting dosed in a bar in Greenwich Village and then losing their minds on LSD, and a lot of these people would never recover. And so being exposed to some sort of like microwave or some sort of poison or whatever it was that is causing these brain symptoms, that would be in line with something that we already know has happened in history, something that we perpetrated against our own citizens and other agents from other countries. Don't forget, MK Ultra involved other agents. Do I think it's an MK Ultra operation, something similar to that? Probably not. Maybe it is some incidental exposure. But it's not out of the question to think that another country could be fucking with U.S. diplomats, because we have a history of doing the same to other countries and doing the same to our own citizens. So why the fuck not, basically? Also, this last part of the report, where it says no plausible single source of energy, neither microwaves nor sonic. I guess people thought it was microwaves at first, and the idea was that these diplomats were kind of getting blasted by microwaves and that was frying their brain. I don't know. It's probably not that. There's no plausible single source of energy, neither microwaves nor sonic, that can produce both the recorded audio video signals and the reported medical effects. We believe the recorded sounds are mechanical or biological in origin rather than electronic. And BuzzFeed came out with this report. It was a declassified U.S. State Department report, again, that said the most likely cause of this illness was crickets. So maybe it's crickets, and I hope it's crickets, by the way. And there's something going on where people are experiencing symptoms from crickets, and the buzzing noise is crickets, and I don't know. People are being exposed to something, and it's not a malicious act by someone else or a group of people. And I hope it's that. Also, maybe there is an outside agency from another country that is coming in and making these exposures seem like crickets. Or maybe they found out some sort of biological weapon to use to inflict harm on United States diplomats. And there's some back and forth between us and another country that we have no fucking idea about, because these agencies operate in secrecy. So there's no way to truly know. And again, this is all speculation. This is all hearsay. There's nothing to actually prove that someone is trying to commit acts against United States diplomats. But maybe someone's figured out a way to do it, and they're using some sort of biological weapon or exposure and targeting these people and causing brain injuries. And they've managed to make it look like something naturally occurring. And I mean, that's kind of what happened with MK Ultra. People were dosed in public many times. People did not know what was happening to them when they were dosed. A lot of times they were never told they were even being given anything. Sometimes people were told in MK Ultra that they were being dosed with something, but they weren't told what. Other people were told, yes, you were getting LSD. And others were simply, you know, lured in with prostitutes into safe houses in New York and San Francisco and then dosed and started tripping out and had no idea. And they assumed it was, they were going crazy or super drunk or fucked up or it was a dream or whatever. And some people recovered and a lot of people did not. They went insane and they had long lasting damages. So it is not absurd to think that someone may have figured out a way to inflict long lasting damages to US diplomats in this case and make it look like something that has occurred from nature. And again, I hope it's not the case, but based on past evidence, and you can look into MK Ultra, you can read Poisoner in Chief by Sidney Gottlieb. This is all public information. You can see the type of shit that the CIA has been willing to do to innocent civilians and agents from other countries, nonetheless. So it's not crazy to think that another country is doing the same thing to us. And it's, I'm just throwing that out there. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but that's my thought on that headline, that 20-minute extrapolation. What are my thoughts on Havana Syndrome and that excerpt? Maybe there's some pernicious shit going on. The next thing I want to get into, which is somewhat related because it does involve symptoms and the health of people, although this is the health of billions of people, not just hundreds.